child's Christmas in Yorkshire. A magic Christmas. I remember it was raining and we had to stay inside, even though I got a bike for Christmas. I think Father Christmas must have had a bit of a job on with it, because some of the newness had been knocked off. But it was a nice bike. I was busting to have a ride, but I just sat next to it in the hallway for a bit, polishing the handlebars and ringing the bell, until me mam threatened to belt me. I lifted the back end up and turned the pedal, playing with the wheels. Then I got my finger caught in a spoke and said a swear word, which mam just happened to hear. So then I had to help bake the dinner, peel a whole sink full of spuds in cold water standing right next to her for an hour, and listening to some boring choir on the wireless singing hymns. Then a bloke called Ivory Manuel came on and sang a song, and me dad started singing along with him. Mam always says Christmas is a strain. Sometimes I can see what she means. Mam had been up since 6 o'clock in the morning to do the big dinner, not long after me and our Jimmy got up. Jimmy got a medieval fort for Christmas, not a bad one neither. Real stone walls, about a foot high, made of plastic, but he didn't know how it all fixed together, and Mam didn't know because she's useless at stuff like that, and I couldn't help because it wasn't mine and I wasn't allowed to go near it. Grandad was no use, because he was still walking round from their house with Granny, but they had to go past the pub, so they weren't going to be here for a long while. Me dad was still wrestling with the Christmas lights. We could hear him rattling somewhere behind the tree. He'd been working on them for about 2 weeks now. Miss Gower, my teacher at school, would say he's very persistent. Mam just says he's bloody stubborn and always has been. I mean, everybody knows what it's like trying to get Christmas lights going. There's always one bulb that's not working. On our string there were 23 not working. In fact, only 2 lit up, and one of them had all the paint chipped off it. And every year it was the same. Me dad would get the lights out of the attic 2 weeks before Christmas, and every year he seemed real surprised because they weren't working. They never have worked. If you ask me, they get worse. I think we had 5 bulbs lit up last year. Anyway, I read me Beano Annual again, then it was dinner time, so we all sat in the kitchen with the windows all steamed up, and waited for Granny and Grandad to come from the pub. I'd set the table, so I didn't think it was fair that Mam let Jimmy light the Christmas candle in the middle. So I opened the back door for a minute, and the wind blew it out. Then I lit it again. We all got sick of waiting for the others, so in the end me dad had to go across and get 'em out of the pub. But they must have turned awkward in there, 'cause it took him about 20 minutes. When they did all get back, it took 'em ages to get their coats off. Then Gran put hers back on, 'cause she says it's always cold in our house, and it bloomin' wasn't. Me mam was red as a beetroot. So was Gran, come to think of it. Any road, we finally all squashed in around the kitchen table, and Mam stuck the big knife into the goose. It was a great dinner. I had 3 platefuls and Jimmy had 2. Then me mam brought out the Christmas pudding, which me and Jimmy aren't too keen on really, but there's usually a threepenny bit hidden inside, so we always ask for a big lump. There was white sauce on it and all, which tasted brown because of the lamb's navy rum me mam likes in it. Me dad tried to light it with a match, or more like half a box of matches, and he burnt his finger. Then him and me mam started arguing about which burns best, brandy or whiskey. Didn't much matter because we hadn't got either of them. I said we had some lighter fluid under the sink, but they both ignored me just as usual. In the end we had the pudding raw, without any flames, but it still seemed to taste all right. Granny had started sweating, so she took her coat off and had a big drink to cool down. Sherry it was. As usual though, it wasn't me that got the threepenny bit. This year it was Grandad. I wouldn't mind, but he had a great pocket full already. Me Grandad's a good magician, according to him. He can take a coin and make it disappear out of his hand, as long as you're looking at the right hand, and then he makes it turn up in somebody's ear. He was sat between Granny and me mam, so he took the threepenny bit, made it disappear, looked at me and Jimmy as though he didn't know where it could have gone, then reached up behind Gran's left ear to dig for it. "Bugger off, George," she said, and elbowed him in the ribs, knocking the wind out of him and making him flip the threepenny bit halfway across the table, right into the jug of pudding sauce. It sat on the skin on the top, and for a minute I thought it was going to float, but then it slipped beneath the surface like a submarine under attack. We all just looked, and apart from Jimmy who went, "Ha ha!" nobody dare say anything. But I could see me dad starting to shake. Mam gave him a look, and I heard something under the table, like somebody's leg being kicked. But Dad couldn't hold it, and he stuffed his napkin in his mouth just in time to stop a great big laugh Unfortunately, the laugh came out of his nose, pushing a huge snotter in front of it. Me and Jimmy howled, and nearly wet our pants laughing. Well, I say nearly, but I think Jimmy actually did, 'cause he got down from the table a minute later, even though he had some pudding left. Mum just tutted and passed Dad a tea towel. Granny had missed it as she was pouring herself some more sherry. Then, when Grandad got his breath back and stopped rubbing his ribs, he said, "Hey lads, here's another." And he took his white linen napkin, still clean even at the end of dinner, which is more than you could say for his sleeve, hung it out flat in front of him, and showed us, the audience, both sides. "See," he said, "a perfectly good napkin." "And it blooming well wants to be," said Mam. "I paid 5 bob for the half dozen, mind you don't tear it." But Grandad was off again, into magic land. Me and Dad looked at each other, trying to remember if we'd seen this trick before, and we hadn't. Jimmy came back and climbed onto his chair. "What you doing, Grandad?" "Oh, magic, me lad. Just some good old-fashioned magic. Watch this." He stuck up a finger on his right hand and put the napkin over it, making it look like a tall white rabbit ear. Then, with his other hand, he pretended to quickly pull a hair out of Granny's head, and she was busy having a drink, so she didn't notice. Then Grandad pretended to tie the invisible hair, a long one, around the top of the napkin, and he pulled it back towards him. The ear twitched, just like he was really pulling it, and although I knew it was just his finger moving underneath, Jimmy thought it was real magic, and his mouth was wide open, and with all the pudding he had stuck round his gob, he looked just like a chocolate doughnut. Dad laughed a bit, but not 'cause he thought it was funny. Then Grandad, even though he's quite old, started to get excited. Mam would say he got carried away, and what happened next was a real surprise. He took the napkin rabbit ear and pulled it through a hole he made in his left hand by putting his finger and thumb together. Then he got the lighted Christmas candle from the middle of the table and held it up so we could all see. Mam dropped her spoon into a dish with a clatter, and Granny put her sherry glass back down. This was serious magic, and Dad winked at me. We'd certainly never seen this one before. Then, with what I think you call a flourish, Grandad stuck the napkin right into the flame and set it alight. Mam screamed and covered her mouth with her hands, probably to stop a lot of swearing coming out. Granny picked up her sherry glass and had another big drink, while me and Dad and Jimmy just looked with our eyes as big as dinner plates. The napkin was really burning now, with a big orange flame and smoke as black as coal going up to the ceiling and curling round the light bulb. Grandad laughed a bit, then spat in his other hand, but he didn't talk, so it was just wet spit. Then, quick as a flash, he grabbed at the flame and snuffed it out. "Aha!" he said. There was still some smoke, though, and a bloomin' awful stink. Mam looked a bit funny, like Jimmy looks when I've been spinning him round by the legs. Granny put her glass down and, without even looking, reached across for the sherry bottle and got it first go. Dad looked like somebody had given him a good smack. Meanwhile, Grandad was rumpling the napkin up into a tight little ball and squishing it as small as he could into his hands and laughing real loud. And then, with the napkin completely hidden inside his gnarly old hands, he got me to blow on him and say a magic word. "Abracadabra," I said, and he slowly peeked through the crack between his 2 thumbs into the ball in his hands. Then he reached in with his teeth, pretending to pull really hard, and he groaned and he growled a bit and pulled out just a corner of the napkin. Slowly, bit by bit, it all came out. And then quickly, with another big flourish, he stretched out the napkin and held it up and turned it all around to us, real proud-like, showing us both sides as if to say, "There, bet you can't believe you saw this napkin on fire a minute ago." We all just stared. Dad slowly closed his eyes. Jimmy had stopped breathing, and I think he was trying real hard not to wet his pants again. Granny looked tired, like she does when she comes out of church, and she took another big drink of her sherry. Mam looked like she was going to be sick. See, the napkin just hung there, with a great big burn hole right in the middle, and black marks coming out to the edges, like a big black spider with its gut shot out. I could see Grandad's face through the hole, peekaboo, and he was still smiling, daft old beggar. I don't think he'd practiced this trick. There was a big pile of ash on Grandad's plate, making his pudding and white sauce look like a volcano, and his hands were all black, I suddenly heard the clock ticking, quite loud, on the sideboard. Funny how you notice things like that sometimes. Nobody said anything, and I didn't think it was a very good trick, and it smelled really bad. But after a bit Dad said, "Nice one, George." Then Granny said something about going upstairs for a lie down, and took the sherry bottle with her. Dad suddenly remembered he still had the Christmas lights to get going, so he went back into the living room, and Jimmy went with him to do his medieval fort. Half a minute later, it was just me and Grandad and me mam sat in the kitchen. But they weren't talking. Well, I think I heard Grandad say something, but it was just to himself, I think. And then I looked through the window, and it had stopped raining. So I went to the hallway and wheeled me bike past me Grandad, through the kitchen door into the backyard, and I went for a ride. Me first ride on me new bike. And it was magic.